The controversy over that Emancipation Memorial statue featuring Abraham Lincoln freeing a kneeling slave. Many there just want the statue removed. My next guest says, how about putting Harriet Tubman in its place? Of course, Harriet Tubman, who was the famous abolitionist, former slave, who helped free dozens of slaves during and after the Civil War itself. The man advocating that opposition, Marcus Goodwin, an independent candidate for the City Council, the District of Columbia Council. Sir, very good to have you.
Thank you for having me on.
So let's discuss this. The statue itself, how do you feel about it? I mean, is it the presence of the kneeling slave that bothers you, or the fact that maybe Harriet Tubman would be a less controversial statue in its place?
Well, I think your characterization there is indicative of part of the issue. It's not a slave. That's a freed citizen standing at the knee of Abraham Lincoln there. So we first want to talk about it being a freed citizen, a liberated person who needs to be depicted as someone who's empowered. And this conversation about the statue is emblematic about the relationship between the United States of America and the African American community. So I'm happy that bringing this conversation forward with the petition that I created has contributed to our national dialogue about how we treat and produce imagery in public spaces and in the way that our economies and societies are built that reflect African Americans, their stature, their position, and how we can make improvements. And that's what all of my advocacy has been about. How do we elevate ourselves from a depiction of someone kneeling with an emancipator standing above us and the feeling that we should be grateful somehow that our just due is provided, versus how do we create an equitable society for all people? So that's the messaging I'm talking about. And I'm talking at the very local level, how do we create an issues-based platform reflective of those values?
Well, I'm sure you know also about the background of the statue, that it was to herald the Emancipation Proclamation itself when Abraham Lincoln did announce that he wanted to free all the slaves. But that was news, certainly, to those in the South at the time who had argued, well, you can say that all you want, Mr. President, but your edict will not change that, and that this recognizes the slave himself first getting that news. Now, we can go back and forth on whether that merits him kneeling, to your point. I get that. But I'm wondering whether, in this environment, whether we're going too far. Do you think that the efforts here, and what you want to do with, Harriet Tubman, which is a valid alternative, is addressing the underlying problem that you want addressed?
And I think what you've articulated is part of the revisionist history that we learn in our schools today, because we learn about people that were enslaved and then magically were liberated. Of course, it took 2.5 years for the Emancipation Proclamation to make it to Galveston, Texas, which is why we have our Juneteenth celebration to this day.
Absolutely.
But we also need to recognize that we're not totally liberated. When we look at the status of the criminal justice system that incarcerates over 1 million African Americans to this day, when we look at housing and economic development in Washington, D.C., the capital of the wealthiest nation in the world, we have an 81-to-1 wealth gap between black residents and white residents. The median net worth of black families in the district is $3,500. The median net worth of white families is $284,000. The same extends into
How would you
education.
correct that? If you made it to the council, how would you correct that? What would you advocate?
Well, as I said, we need more home purchase assistance, down payment assistance, and long-term relief. Someone like my mother, who was able to purchase a home 30 years ago, now pays more in property taxes than she ever did on her mortgage. So longtime homeowners need more opportunities for relief from property taxes so that they're not systematically priced out of the city, especially if they're part of the working and middle class, which we've seen consistently priced out, especially our African American community, especially from home ownership, from business ownership, and from educational opportunities. We still have a segregated education system in this city and other major cities such as New York City, because when people who gentrify traditionally African-American communities have children that come of school age, they leave. They start to put their children into a private school system. So the issue is not just the statue, it's that we're talking about a conversation that we're asked as African Americans to take a leap of faith, to trust and understand that America and the American dream is accessible to everyone, but we've never seen that. Not in 1865, not in 2020, and we need to have a conversation not about past statues that have been up for 144 years, but about the future. And that's what my campaign and my message is all about.
We'll watch very closely. Marcus Goodwin, thank you for taking the time. Very good having you on.
Thank you, Neil.